I think that's the perfect way to describe it. It's like, because you are right, like when we start as children, it's a very simple kind of reaction to what we see and like how we communicate with our caregivers, right?
True joy.
True, like just like from an internal. But then as you get older and older, there's complexity with it.
Yeah.
You see how other people can use it against you. You see how other people can like bring it out of you through actions. And comedians are like the best example of that. How they would like kind of like work a whole joke to just elicit that laughter from you. I think one thing I've always been fascinated about too is how we use laughter to kind of navigate those social bonds. You mentioned your son when he's first of interacting with people. Understanding laughter is a very important part to like making friends and understanding. So talk to me a little bit more about that. What role does that play in there?
It's very important for making and maintaining social bonds, and those might be social bonds that are very transient. I remember getting on a train, and when you're on a train, you get a double seat to yourself, and you're like, yes, results. And there was a woman across from me, and she got 4 seats all to herself, and then just before the train lit off, these 2 men got on, and they both had like cups of coffee, and they sat opposite her. And she said, what she said was, I'm going to have to move. I can't deal with the smell of coffee. But what she did was she said it with really loads of laughter, and they laughed. And what was just, actually, look, I want to move because you smell. That's basically what she's saying. But it was all managed really skillfully because she laughed, they laughed, everybody understood, we're all fine. And that, we kind of said that they're never going to be your friends together in the future, presumably. But the laughter was, and you negotiating with the laughter on the part of everybody concerned in that was what made it not just, oh I'm going away. And that's really transient, but it's all the way through to, like you're seeing an old friend, you're almost laughing just thinking about the chance to get to laugh with them, and it's, that's the maintaining of the social bonds. And then there's space in the middle when you meet new people and you find that you are laughing together, you feel closer to them. Maybe that's a new friendship on the way. So it's a sort of, it's a sign of how you feel, and it's also seems to be like the mechanism for enhancing those bonds. So when you see an old friend or you're making a new friend, laughing together is making you feel closer, and it's also making you feel better together. Literally, your mood will be improving together. So you're both in the moment feeling the benefit of that interaction, and you're also strengthening the social bonds you have. And we know that social bonds are almost the most important aspect of your life. The size and the strength of your social network predicts your physical health, your mental health, and even how long you'll live. So, and that's because those are the people you talk to, and those are the people you laugh with.
I think I also want to go even take a little step back and explain, because I know that I think one of your lectures you talked about what happens to us when we laugh, what happens to our rib cages and stuff like that, and like how that kind of affects the voices. And so speak a little bit more about that too, about what's happening to our body and what the sounds are coming from.
So laughter's been described as more like a different way of breathing than it is a different way of speaking. So when you're, we're breathing all the time, so we use our rib cage and the muscles between our ribs. We contract those muscles that pulls the rib cage out and up, and that pulls air into your lungs, and then just relax them back down. So you've got that going on all the time. You're doing that, don't stop. When we start talking, we use those same muscles very differently. We take a breath in, and then we very finely control the flow of air out. We don't just have this elastic recoil pushing the air out, and that's actually enabling us to make a sound out of voice box. So if you're singing or you're speaking or you're beatboxing, all the things humans can do with their voices are dependent on that. And if I keep talking without taking another breath, you can hear it having to work really, really hard. And if you laugh, what you get is, instead of that kind of smooth, continuous in-out of what's called metabolic breathing to stay alive, or that very fine control for breathing for speech and song, what you have is single, large squeezing of the whole rib cage, those intercostal muscles also pushing air out at once. Ha, 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 ha. Each one of those contractions is just pushing air out of you. And that's giving you a very basic sound. There's nothing complex happening up here at all. It doesn't look at all like speech. But it's also giving you a sound that's it's relatively easy to make, which is probably why babies can do it. In fact, crying and laughing are quite similar in this respect. They're quite similar in terms of how they come out of you. And there's something we don't really understand, but in terms of how your brain is able to have control over your motor system, if there's a competition between breathing and talking or singing and laughing, the laughter will win. You know, if you've had that experience and you're laughing, you really should not have been laughing, and you're desperately trying not to, and these noises keep coming out of you.
Say something, but you can't because you
can't talk through it. Exactly. And that's, I mean, there's a sort of amazing examples, but there's some sort of almost like privileged access that laughter has to the motor system, because lots of things can't do that. Crying can do it. Laughter can do it.
I think that's so true. I think, yeah, you mentioned that example when I have so many memories where I was talking to a friend, I'll be trying to explain the joke, but because I'm trying to explain the joke, I'm thinking about the joke and I can't get it out because I'm dying of laughter, and he's standing there like, go on, let me know. Like, I need to know. And I think that makes it even more funny. And it's exactly. Like, I think that's the role that the laughter has. And I think that's why it's so fascinating to study, because you can really like pick it apart from so many different angles, even though it's just such a thing that you just feel like you just naturally do.
So for me, it started out as let's look at an emotional expression, and now it's taking me through into like how we regulate emotion, the nature of friendship, how we make and maintain social bonds, why it feels good to laugh. All these different things are kind of just laughter takes you off in these different directions all the time.
Okay, so on that kind of topic, I've always wondered what happens if you don't understand laughter from an early age. Like, how does that role, what role does that play in your social kind of interactions, and how does that affect you later on?
We're still looking at this, but there clearly are big developmental implications of how you've learned to laugh. I've described there is that sort of long period if you're learning how to use this thing. So we found that teenage boys who are at risk of psychopathy, so that means they have conduct disorders, so they're badly behaved, but they also score highly on tests of what are called callous and unemotional traits. And what that means is they behave badly and they don't care if they hurt somebody. That's what's so conduct disorder, that doesn't put you at risk of psychopathy. Lots of people have a conduct disorder. But if you have a conduct disorder, so you behave badly and you don't care if you hurt people, that's when it looks more dangerous. That's when you've got that. And it doesn't mean to say those boys will all become psychopaths, but they're at risk. They've got the right psychological profile. And we scanned them compared to a group of normally developing teenage boys, and we had them listening to laughter. And what we found was, in the brain of the teenage boys, as you see in adults, when people hear laughter, you can actually see the brain primed to join in. And that's almost certainly the brain system that's underlying that contagiousness of laughter. So that's sort of, it's very hard not to laugh. If you're around a friend and that friend laughs, you find it very hard not to join in with them. So you're seeing that kind of priming response, and that priming response was significantly reduced in the teenage boys at risk of psychopathy. And if you give them laughter and ask them to rate how much does this make you want to join in, they rate it less. Now, what we can't tell from this is correlation or causation, because you don't know if correlation doesn't prove causation. I mean, so they have this reduced brain response and they have this reduced sort of behavioural response to laughter. We don't know if the experiences they've had, because they have this psychological profile, mean they haven't had the opportunities to learn to laugh. Maybe their family they grew up in, just people were not laughing around them. Or if their psychological profile meant they couldn't. We can't, which way around, what's caused what here, we can't tell. But what we can say is, if you don't laugh when other people laugh, you are missing out on a really huge way that humans make and maintain social bonds. And it's presumably much easier for you to feel quite separate to other people and much more able to treat them in a functional way, which is, again, another hallmark of psychopathy. So that would be one possibility. And just in general, really, we've created a psychological test for sort of picking up on people's experiences of laughter. And we find quite big differences. So people vary a lot in how much they think they laugh. People vary in how much they like laughter. They vary in how much they understand other people's use of laughter. They vary in how much they understand their own use of laughter. And that variation must come from somewhere. So again, something that we're really keen to do is actually to take that back and look at this developmental trajectory and see if we can, what is actually underlying this. Is it, if you grow up in a house without a lot of laughter, does that just mean that you are an adult who laughs less, or what other, or does it have no impact on you? Does it you know, is it coming via a totally different route?
Yeah, I think you mentioned something that's so fascinating. I think the relationship or laughter's relationship to personality or emotion, they're based on whether it's nature or nurture, and growing up in that's so interesting. I think that tells a lot about people. And I think when you meet someone, it also kind of gives you some perspective. If they're not laughing a lot, maybe it's not you, maybe it's something growing up in it's their family which really values laughter at all. So or they don't even understand how laughter is used in a social situation or something like that.
Exactly, and it's just they've maybe never learned to use laughter to deal with, say, social awkwardness or a stressful situation, because it's learned behaviour. And they developed other strategies.
Speaking on that, I want to now zoom out a bit to kind of look at the evolutionary kind of perspective. So one question I always had, might be a funny question, but what do you think cavemen were laughing about?